Finishing up with Ronald Reagan's immigration policies. Before, we had George Washington's immigration policies, and then before that I talked about Harry Truman's immigration policies. Now, Harry Truman's immigration law is going to revise the quota system, but there are some Asian groups that was for it because it actually increased the amount of Asians that was allowed to come in. But even though it increased it, it was still lower compared to everything else, so low that Harry Truman vetoed it because he thought it was un-American and inhumane. He thought it was racist against the Asians as a specific group, and he also didn't like how we went after communist countries. We were allies with some of the communist countries that he was friends with, Sweden, maybe, I don't know which countries, but he considered some of them allies, so he didn't like the fact that we were sitting there saying that undesirables was Jewish people and Asians and communists. I mean, undesirables would be something like, you know, I mean, somebody that has, like, diseases and shit, right? You don't want a bunch of diseases coming over here, so the three interesting things are three preferred groups, which I hear this a lot. Educated people, those with special skills, and then those with economic potential. So that was some Truman thing. So Truman actually vetoed it, but then it overran his veto. And Guam got to become an American. If you're a citizen in Guam, then you got to become an American citizen, which only Puerto Rico and Virgin Island territories were allowed to be American citizens. Refugees were allowed. So Harry Truman, 1952, even though they had a quota system back then, and I agree with the quota system, I like the quota system, I think we should go back to the quota system because that's one way we can influence our policy, diplomatic, through peaceful means. Instead of militarily dominating everybody, we got USAID. We use that money to, you know, sort of pull the strings of the world. So we use, you know, throw millions of dollars, and if they don't do what we want, then we pull that money, and we got immigration. So, you know, I think if we had allow 1 million Norwegians to come over here, I bet we wouldn't even get 3 Norwegians to come here. So just because, but it's a way to encourage, right? Because he's essentially right that the people that are coming to America, especially if they're running, especially if they're getting hell out of Dodge, they're running away from their shitty country. So we're getting a lot of people that are running away from shitty countries, which, you know, makes sense. If it's a shitty country, why would you want to stay there? But it's not, you know, in terms of what kind of people are you getting when it comes to immigrants. Well, since you're getting a lot of the poorer folks, uneducated, and those are fine. None of those, that's not wrong. But you're not getting any of the, you know, Germans. You're not getting any of the educated people. What kind of conversations are you going to have here? So I think the quota system is a good idea. Now, these immigration laws had actually undone a lot of the shit that George Washington set up. He was racist as fuck. You couldn't become an American citizen if you was black or if you were a Native American. None of the women, right, I don't think they had a right to vote, so women didn't have a right to vote, right, till 1920. So you couldn't become a voting citizen if you're a woman or a Native American or black or Asian, or if you're an enslaved whites, no slaves could become an American, and you had to have good moral character. So these racist white supremacists were going to judge your... So while George Washington is out back raping his slaves, then he comes out and then judges you whether or not you're a good person. So that's the immigration policies of the first president of the United States. So now we're on Ronald Reagan. So Ronald Reagan, he passes, the Congress under Ronald Reagan passes a 1986 immigration bill, and then he comes back with the Immigration Executive Order, which affects 100,000 families. Now, this is what people say Ronald Reagan granted amnesty, the great, you know, conservative Republican bulwark. He granted amnesty to all these illegal aliens, right? So Ronald Reagan, his executive order affected 100,000 families. It gave a deferred deportment for those children who lived with one or two parents who were legalizing in the process of naturalization. So if you were a child and your parent, one or both of them, were in the process of naturalization, well, they weren't going to deport you. Isn't that nice, right? If your mom or dad was getting legalized, and you had a kid, but they weren't born here, so they're not an anchor baby. Anchor babies are legally American citizens. They have American birthright citizenship just like all Americans do. So the anchor babies are just as American as you and me. Hell, all you motherfuckers are anchor babies. Not a single one of you motherfuckers are not anchor babies. 329 million anchor babies. Every single one of you all become an American because you're born on this soil. So what this does is it grants amnesty. It's not amnesty, because amnesty is just say, okay, you're fine. What it does is it deferred the deportment. So they weren't going to deport them. They said, we're not deporting these people. And so essentially it was the people that was already in here. They were working on getting legalized. They were doing the things that was right, but they had started it was basically the 11 million people. We got 11 million people here who are working. Most of them are good, hard workers, got family, and they, fulfill their obligations. But they're not criminal or nothing, except for they're not supposed to be here. They're not allowed to be here. So I think that George W. Bush had a plan where he wanted to get a pathway to citizenship for the people that are here, deport the criminals. But what about the hard workers that have been here their whole life? The Trump administration sent one father out who had 6 kids. 6 kids were born in America, so they got that birthright citizenship, but the father was deported. The father got kicked, out. And so even though he gave birth to 6 American babies, and he's been living in the United States for 30, 40 years or so, he's going to have to go back to a country he doesn't really even recognize. Are his people even there? Is there anybody back in Mexico for him to go back? I mean, that'd be like sending the Germans back to Germany. No, you need to get out of here. I know you all been here for 150 years, but you didn't have your visa. Where's your paperwork? You got your paperwork? Okay, you got to go back to Germany or England. Property crime was reduced by 5% because they found honest legal work. So the idea was to allow these folks to not live in the shadows, to bring them out, and they're in the process of naturalization. So 3.2 million illegals were granted amnesty. So yeah, Ronald Reagan did grant a major amnesty, not everybody, not all of them, but the ones that were in the process of naturalization, and their children were not to be deported. So they didn't get citizenship, and then they weren't given just blanket amnesty. Everything's fine. They still had to go through the process of naturalization, and then I guess the kids would have to do something. But they weren't going to get deported anymore. So they had the protection of the American government to not be deported. That wasn't going to be so that's what they talk about with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan did a kind of amnesty. And then Papa Bush is going to come back, and then he's going to kind of fill in the holes. Because, if it's just the parents and the naturalization and the kids, what about the kids that just come by themselves? What about the kids that are dropped off? What about all these migrant kids that are by themselves? So there's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of extras that Poppy Bush went ahead and covered the rest of them. So he consolidated the amnesty. So the 3 million people that Ronald Reagan saved, Papa Bush is going to go ahead and save those 3 million plus another million also. So Papa Bush was also doing a kind of amnesty also. The Immigration Act of 1990 was passed under Papa Bush. November 29th, 1990, it was introduced by Ted Kennedy in 1989. It reformed the 1965 U.S. Immigration Act and 1952 and 1986 Immigration and Reform Act. Ronald Reagan had allowed 3 million illegal and undocumented human immigrant aliens to become legal residents, not U.S. citizens, but legal residents. As long as they had entered the U.S. before January 1st, 1982, they could get work permits and they wouldn't be deported. So now they could get work permits and they wouldn't be deported. This is 86, right? 86 and 87 under Ronald Reagan. Now Papa Bush, his Immigration Act of 1990, they're going to add a whole bunch of things. So this is what the difference of Papa Bush and Ronald Reagan was. Papa Bush wanted to do family fairness. The children and spouses of legal residents would not become U.S. citizens, but they'd be allowed to stay here, get work permits, and not be deported. So again, this is just consolidating Ronald Reagan's amnesty, the family fairness. So children and spouses would not become U.S. citizens, but they would be allowed to stay here, get work permits. Passed both houses by overwhelming margins. 700,000 immigrants were allowed to come to the U.S. per year. So this had changed the quota system. So now the quota system allowed 700,000 immigrants to come to the U.S. every year. I think that's 1.5 million. 1.5 million is the number that's coming into America now. We don't have a quota system now, and that's about twice as much as we were allowing in 1990. In 1990, we're only allowing 700,000 immigrants. Now 1.5 immigrants are coming. So there is twice the amount of immigrants that are coming. It's not as high as 1890. The Germans and the Irish, when they were coming in the 1890s, the immigrant population was 15%. Now it's 14%. So this isn't the worst. I mean, I wouldn't say it's an immigration crisis, just because immigrants, 75% of all the immigrants that come over here are illegal. So 75%, if you've seen a foreign-born person, a person that speaks a different language, someone speaking Spanish, 75% of the people who are born in another country who live here are here legally. So you should assume that they're legal. 75% of them are legal. So also, Poppy Bush provided family-based immigration visas, created 5 subgroups of employment-based immigration characterized by occupation, added a diversity visa lottery program from low admittance countries, added a temporary protected status category, mostly for El Salvador refugees. So why are people fleeing El Salvador? Well, we've been fucking El Salvador up too. There's also the H-1B visa for highly skilled workers, cutbacks for extended families, eliminated the exclusion of homosexuals under the medically unsound sexual deviant, lifted English testing for permanent residents over 55 years of age who lived in the U.S. for at least 15 years, deported violent illegal aliens in federal prison, and extended minor children amnesty to children and spouses. So said it cut back some extended families, so just your children and just, your spouse, but not your second uncle. Eliminated the exclusion of homosexuals. So this is a very progressive thing. Now homosexuals are allowed to come into America. Before, if you were homosexual, you were characterized as sexually deviant. So that reminds me of the Jewish and the communist thing of Harry Truman. Harry Truman, they made sure they didn't want the undesirables, such as the Jewish people and the communists and some Asians and homosexuals, right? Now homosexuals, as of 1990, because of Poppy Bush, are allowed to come in here. English testing for permanent residents over 55 years of age who lived in the U.S. for at least 15 years. They didn't have to do it. You didn't have to learn your English. There is no standard for English. There is no actual standard. There's no academy for English. There's no one dictionary. There's a whole bunch of dictionaries. So to say you got to learn English, I mean, I don't know. You got to know some of the words, but I don't know. I don't like it. I think you should learn Creole. If you want to come to America, you need to understand Creole. Creole is the way to go. That's for, a postmodern population. And that's Poppy Bush. So he consolidated Ronald Reagan's amnesty, doubled down on it. So those 3 million that Ronald Reagan had said was okay and free, they're okay and free under Poppy Bush too. And he also, changed some shit here and there. Now George W. Bush, he's going to do the same thing too that Poppy Bush had did. So you're going to have Bill Clinton in between there. But let's talk a little bit about George W. Bush. So he had done several things. George W. Bush, he was pushing for more, more immigration. They're all tough on immigrants, right? The Democrats and the Republicans, Bill Clinton, they're all extending, hiring more border patrols, hiring more Homeland Security people, hiring more ICE, just hiring more people, personnel on the border. Now, George W. Bush, he tried to address this immigration problem. George W. Bush, his parameters were this. We got 11 million people in this country that's not supposed to be here, right? So 11 million is a big problem. What are you going to do with the 11 million people? Well, for George W. Bush, the 2 parameters was you can't have mass deportation. No, you can't just take all 11 million and send them all out. But you also can't have mass amnesty. So those are the parameters. Do you want just one big blanket amnesty for everybody, or do you want, one big blanket deportation for everybody? So he was saying that we need to get into the middle of the road between those two extremes. So I think he's right about the two parameters, right? Don't want massive deportations, don't want massive amnesty, but how, which side does that come down on when you actually get, what's the middle road exactly? Is it towards, the deportations or towards the amnesty? George W. Bush, okay, so George W. Bush is actually pushing for high-tech fences in urban corridors. So he was talking about a Mexican wall a long time ago. Hillary Clinton was for a wall. George W. Bush also wanted to build new patrol roads and barriers in rural areas, motion sensors, infrared cameras, unmanned aerial vehicles. He wanted drones. He wanted lots of technology to guard the border. He didn't want to militarize the border, but he did want to guard it. And he also said that more than 85% of those who are crossing are Mexican, and most of them are sent back within 24 hours. And he also said in the past 5 years, this is a 2006 speech, that 6 million people were deported. If that's true, then that would make George W. Bush the deporter-in-chief. So Obama deported 2.5 million, but he's claiming 6 million was deported. That, I feel like how they added deported numbers is different. They're saying Obama, they added it differently. That's why it looks like it's so much more, whereas they didn't add it the same as they did. So I would like to actually look further into that, because George W. Bush could have been deporting even more than the deporter-in-chief. So George W. Bush is deporting more than Trump, so was Barack Obama deporting more than Trump. So George W. Bush wanted to find a middle way. In 2003, there was 10,000 Homeland Security employees. In 2008, there was 17,000. So that he increased the Homeland Security employees by 7,000 employees. ICE doubled nearly 2,700 to 5,000. This is from 2003 to 2008 period. 2006, the Border Patrol went from 9,000 to 12,000, so he's even getting more than, in 2008, there was 15,000. So by the time he gets out, he nearly doubled it from 9,000 to 15,000 Border Patrol agents. In the past 5 years, 6 million were deported. That's what he said. High-tech fences in urban corridors. High-tech fences. So he wanted a fancy-ass fucking wall, nice, beautiful wall, big, beautiful wall, right? George W. Bush. That was 2006. 2007, George W. Bush was saying that they had spent $4.6 billion on border security in 2001 to $10.4 billion in 2004. So we're spending $5 billion, now we're spending $10 billion, right? So he's pushing for more money, more border agents, more money is going to this. And again, for the middle passage, he wants a middle passage, not amnesty, right? Not a blanket amnesty, but not total mass deportation. What they wanted 5 specific things. George W. Bush, this is just a speech. He never got any of this, but this is what he had said that he wanted. And actually he was, taking a leadership role on this. This isn't what typical Republicans, I think your Republican right-wing stance is deport them all 11 million. So what George W. Bush wanted was to pay a price, number one. Number two, learn English, right? If you're here in this country and you weren't supposed to, well, you got to be punished somehow. You also got to learn English. You also got to pay taxes. You also got to pass a background check. And then you got to hold a job for a number of years. So pay taxes. Are they going to try to get back taxes? And then if you're poor, you're not paying any taxes anyways. Pass a background check. So that's interesting. If you had no documentation, how do you have a background? But that seems like that should be cake. Learn English. You have to, learn a whole other language. Pay a price. That's interesting. What price do you think they should pay? And then hold a job for a number of years. If you do all 5 of those things, then he says that we should welcome the 11 million people, or the several million people who do all those things into this country. So he provided a pathway to citizenship. And I think that's one of the options. We're going to deport some. I think we should give amnesty to some, and we should have a pathway to citizenship for some. So probably most, pathway citizenship for most. And I think that would actually, get the border, the immigration problem all wrapped up. So let's talk about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, he deported 69,000 in 1996, and then in 1997 he deported 114,000. 114,432 is how many he deported. Donald Trump deported 100,000. In 2017, 100,000 people were deported out of the United States. Well, that's not even Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton deported 114,000. So Bill Clinton deported more people in 1997 than Donald Trump did 20 years later. So Donald Trump is doing this zero-tolerance policy, but he's not able to deport as much as Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. Barack Obama is going to deport way more than Donald Trump. He's deporting 300,000, 400,000 or so, every year. I'll get right back to that. So in 2013, this is a Charles Schumer bill. So this is Barack Obama. Barack Obama tried to tackle immigration too. Well, Barack Obama eventually gets frustrated with Congress because they're not going to do anything, so he issues a executive order, and he wasn't able to get on the national TVs. He wasn't able to get on, from the telly. But there was a Senate bill that was passed by overwhelming margins, 68-32. It passed the Senate, but the House said, fuck you. So the Republicans said, fuck you, we're not going to fix this immigration problem. And it was kind of like a, George W. Bush kind of thing, too. So some deportations, some amnesty, and then some pathway to citizenship. So he also added 40,000 more border agents, more money, the new visas for entrepreneurs, W visa for lower skilled workers. I want to mention that too. The El Salvador, so the El Salvador refugees, they were given out temporary protected status for the El Salvador refugees. So that's Poppy Bush. So both Harry Truman, Poppy Bush, they're all protecting refugees and asylum seekers. I think we should. I think we should have a quota system, so when everything's, just fine and dandy and the world's operating as it should, then as many Germans want to come here, they can come here. We're going to have 500,000 Germans can come here if they want to come here. We'll have a quota system. And after we have that quota system, right, so if everything's working on the up and up, but if we're, pay attention to world events. So if you're paying attention to, if the Rohingya Muslims started to come to America, we should give them, pass their applications to allow them to come here. The refugee and asylum status, yeah, there's a genocide that's happening right now. Hey, the world's policemen, you give a shit about the fucking genocide? I thought you're the good guys. Aren't you all the good guys? There's a genocide. If people are just wiping out, genocide, that's murder. That's murder on a mass scale. Isn't murder on the mass scale? Murder's the worst crime out there, but murder on a mass scale? That's the worst crime on a mass scale. Just crazy. Kill a couple people, then you're a murderer, but kill a million people, you're a goddamn conqueror. So, basically, Obama had a Senate bill that was identical to George W. Bush's, but it died in the 113th Congress. So the U.S. representatives, was being run by the Republicans. The Republicans in the House said, fuck you, Obama, fuck you, Charles Schumer. We're not going to get immigration figured out at all. We're not even going to try. So, yeah. The immigration policies under Obama, right? So they tried a Senate bill. So, Obama tried. Then he passes a executive order, and the executive order eventually gets thrown out, or the Supreme Court says he wasn't allowed to do that, and so now there's no immigration law, no immigration policies. I don't think anybody's on the same page, to be honest with you. What the fuck is going on here? And then if he wants to say the Democrats are to blame, let's see those Border Patrol agents that actually killed Jacqueline and Felix. I bet you they're mostly Republicans. Let's find out who they are. If they're Republicans or Democrats, let's find out who actually killed those kids. Sit there and just blame it on the Democrats. Well, if there was a wall, then it wouldn't have happened. Bullshit. So Barack Obama deported more than every U.S. president in history. I've read that over and over again. So George W. Bush claiming that 6 million were deported. That makes me wonder, what's his number? Where did he get that number from? He's lying, but, it had to come from something. Even if you cut it in half, 3 million, that's still, more than Obama. 2.5 million is what Obama's going to eventually deport total. ICE arrested 300,000 under Obama in 2010 and 2011. So ICE is arresting about 300,000 per year. 200,000 were deported in 2010, 2011. So about 200,000 were being deported. Now his peak year is 2013. 435,498. So, over 400,000 deportations happened in 2013. It's Barack Obama, the deporter-in-chief. Even Bill Clinton beat, Donald Trump. So Let's finish up Barack Obama. 2015, DHS arrested 462,000, deported 333,000. So again, that's Barack Obama. 333,000 were deported. Nearly 500,000 was arrested. Then 2016, DHS carried out 530 and 250 apprehensions. So that's over 500,000 arrested and 344 and 341 removed. So that's over 300,000, 344,000 that was deported. So compared to Donald Trump, we only got 2017 numbers. He gets in there 2016, right? Then 2017, and now it's 2018. He's had 2 years, so we can look at the 2018 numbers, but 2017, he arrested 150,000, and then 100,000 were deported. So that's half. That's half of what Barack Obama had arrested. And the deportations, that's Bill Clinton numbers. It's not even close to Barack Obama. He's deporting, 100, 200, 300, 400,000, 400,000 in 2013, 435,000. So I'm not bragging about it. I'm just saying that the Democrats have been right-wing fucking savages on this, the border issue for quite some time. Sitting there upping, the spending for Border Patrol, getting more border agents. They've been, right-wing Republicans the entire time. So the fact that Donald Trump wants to make this more right-wing, well, the only right-wing you can do is build a wall and then, go after, round up the 11 million people, just like Nazis, put them in trains. Who gives a shit, right? Donald Trump isn't worried about the images that, Bill O'Reilly was worried about. So 150,000 arrested 2017. Donald's policy is a no-tolerance policy. It goes after immigrant families and asylum seekers. It's a bit harsher than Barack Obama, but it's essentially the same. When they went to court to defend it, Donald Trump's people just said, well, we were doing the same as Obama was doing. And so they're now defending Obama's policies. Right now, Obama's the greatest thing ever because, well, he was doing it first. Well, how come we can't do it? He was doing it first. Yeah, well, if he jumped off it, if Obama jumped off a bridge, would you jump off too, Donald? So, he's also the person that has the Muslim ban, right? He also says all Syrian refugees, so we can bomb Syria. We're just not going to take any of the people that tries to get the fuck out of that hellhole that we had created. Democrats want to keep on bombing, right? Not letting the refugees get in these safe haven sanctuaries. And then ICE has opened up 2,300 audits against employers who hire illegal and undocumented. So ICE is doing things. They're still going after the employers. Essentially, it's all the same policies. The biggest problems is he wants this damn wall because if there's a wall, they can't get through. George W. Bush wanted a wall, too. He said he wanted a high-tech fence in urban areas. So he wanted a wall in cities where the cities were. He wanted a wall. And I think there's a wall by San Diego and Tijuana. And the walls are working. That is a boundary to prevent one person from getting into your land. I mean, if you had property, how do you prevent people from getting on your property if they want to get on your, land, a fence, electric fence, you could just go out there and confront them. If you had a big-ass wall, they would have to cross it, and they could get a ladder or so, but it makes it harder. So when it comes to security, if you could just, anytime you can make it harder for someone to do the thing that they're trying to do, that's one extra step. A lot of people say, just shoot them, just shoot them. I don't like that shit. I mean, you could have, maybe, wild dogs on this side. So if they jump over the wall, then they're confronted with wild dogs. But to have, wild dogs on that side and to just shoot them, I can't stand that shit. That's machete. You're going to create a bunch of machetes. So unless they're dangerous, if they're kids, unless they're dangerous looking, I don't like you just shooting. Trespassing, though, it is invasion, technically. If someone comes up on your property, someone comes up in your house, and you don't know who they are, and you truly think that they're going to harm you, you have a right to protect yourself. So I just think that we can be reasonable when it comes to the border. We can be reasonable. So he's, just racism and xenophobia. He doesn't give a shit about the Syrian refugees. He's bombing people all over the world. A no-tolerance policy. So he's making things harsher than what they already were, and they already were pretty fucking harsh. Do we need the wall? No. This is a problem that's looking for a solution. We don't need a wall. A wall probably would help, but it's not. The big problem is, the problem is where the the 4 states, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and California, where it actually happens, where the crossings are happening. So what's up with Texas? Y'all fucking badass, but y'all can't build your own fucking wall? You need America to pay for y'all's wall? Texas can do everything by themselves, right? Don't mess with Texas. So the biggest problems that I see with immigration, I mean, you need to make sure, without borders you don't have a country. That's true. So when people do cross, where they cross, it's not porous. People aren't just flooding across the border here and there and everywhere. Where they are crossing, where they are living, that's scary because you don't know who they are. They got to live in the shadows and they got to be worried about it. That father I was talking about before, Barrios Mendoza, he's a father who had 6 kids. 6 anchor babies, just like all America's, all 329 million American citizens are anchor babies. The only thing that they did to become American was they were born on this soil. That's it. If you're born on this soil, you're an American. You don't have to pass a test. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to be a good person, a good character. You don't have to do none of this shit. None of this stuff. Well, you were born here, so come on in. You don't have to have a special skill. You don't have to be educated. You don't have to have economic potential. Well, your mom and dad fucked, and your mom carried you to term, and here you are. Congratulations, America, or American. Congratulations, little baby. You're now